What do you want it back? Oh, so what do you want? Don't kill the guy. Don't kill the guy. Thank you, Mayor. It's great to be here. Thanks for the beautiful weather. Thank you, Councilman. Really appreciate your service. It's great to be here with my good friend, Congressman Lawler, who's teaming up from moment one together to fight this congestion tax. So thank you for being here. It's we're just a few feet from the GW Bridge. It's my first time here as a congressman. I've been to this community many times, but it's great to be here. The world's busiest bridge and a key artery between the New York and New Jersey economies. A quarter of America's GDP runs through the Northeast. Nearly 300,000 cars and trucks cross over this bridge every single day, helping bring New York City billions in tax revenue and billions more for their small businesses every year. More than 1 million commuters go and work in Manhattan from the outer boroughs outside the city. 1 million commuters go through here. According to studies, nearly 7 people employed in Manhattan commuted from another county. They're coming in for where the congressman lives, where I live. Yet, we're here this morning because New York City and the MTA are literally playing Russian roulette with their economy and are willing to stick it to all those hardworking commuters from Jersey, the outer boroughs, and the New York City suburbs, like the ones my friend Congressman Lawler represents, with their absurd $23 a day congestion tax. A plan that, by the MTA's own admission, won't reduce congestion and won't reduce pollution. In fact, it'll actually increase pollution and congestion, including right here in Fort Lee, New Jersey. And as the MTA put it, will disproportionately impact low-income drivers. More trucks and pollution here in the outer boroughs, more north of 60th Street in Manhattan, more, of course, traffic where the congressman lives. And despite pleas from so many of us, including from the congressman back when he was just running, back when he was in the state legislature, despite all these pleas, from taxi drivers to nurses to hardworking families, New York small businesses, the MTA plans to keep barreling ahead with zero indication they want to hit the brakes. So what do we do about it? What do we do with the MTA's plan to get all us to pay for their years of mismanagement and corruption? How do we stop this $23 a day, $5,000 a year tax that will wax commuters and our families like those that we represent? And remember, every nickel of it goes to the MTA. We share revenue here. The MTA wants to take and steal every single nickel of that $23, right? From not put a nickel in New Jersey Transit, not help where Mike lives, not help the Hudson Valley. Can you imagine a hardworking nurse or taxi driver having to pay $5,000 a year on top of the $17 they pay to go over the GW Bridge? If you add gas and parking, that's $20,000 a year. It's the ultimate MTA cash grab for an agency that's running $2 billion deficits or more, despite getting billions from the federal government. More than $15 billion during the pandemic, more than a couple $1 billion every year. I don't know what they've done with this money. I've said I think they were out on an all-night bender. I'm not really sure. But the bottom line is they're so bureaucratic and such a mismanaged agency riddled with corruption that a judge described them as, quote, an orgy of overtime fraud. Literally, an orgy of overtime fraud. That's what a judge showed. Studies show they'll lose $500 million this year alone from fare skippers. They can't even enforce people paying the fares to use their transit systems. So that's why we're here today, Congressman Lawler and I, to stand up for hardworking Jersey and New York drivers and commuters, for the nurses and the restaurant workers, with no other option but to drive, who will soon face this tax. We're announcing a new bipartisan federal legislation, the Anti-Congestion Tax Act, to help ensure New Jersey and New York drivers who commute into New York City are not hit with this regressive, punitive congestion tax. Our anti-congestion tax legislation, which the Congressman will talk further about in a minute, will freeze federal dollars sent each year to the MTA, which totals approximately $2 billion a year, if the agency decides to go forward with this $23 a year tax. The bipartisan anti-congestion tax will prohibit the U.S. Department of Transportation from awarding any capital investment grants to MTA projects in New York until drivers from Jersey and outer boroughs and New York crossings into Manhattan receive exemptions from any congestion tax. And it will amend the U.S. tax code to offer commuters a federal tax credit at the end of the year equal to the amount they paid in the congestion tax. It will protect both Jersey and New York drivers. The good news, in case some of you say, well, this can't be done. In 1985, Congressman Guy Molinari from Staten Island used the same idea to push New York to change his tolling practices on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. He inserted a provision into federal tax funding bill that removed two-way tolling on the bridge and instituted one-way tolling going to Brooklyn and Staten Island. He got it done. We're going to get it done, working with our good friends Nicole Malliotakis, Congressman Jeff Van Drew. We're going to work together, all of us, to fight the congestion tax. There's nothing partisan about this. It's just what's good for our drivers, our commuters, our economies, and the New York, New Jersey regional economy, and the great community of Fort Lee. So it's why we're standing with the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, with all those opposed, from families to our commuters who say this is an absurd idea. Last point, many of us live in a mass transit desert where there just aren't a lot of options for mass transit. The families have to drive, commuters have to drive. They have no other options. So let's tell the MTA, who thinks, again, that we're the ATM machine, MTA backwards, ATM, that's how they look at us. Let's tell them to stop this in its brakes. Let's work together cooperatively, like we always have, in the greatest country in the world. There's no reason we can't stand together and work together. Thank you. God bless you. Now let me introduce another great ally, a great fighter for New York families, my dear friend, Congressman Lawler.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Got it?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here in Fort Lee. I want to thank my colleague and good friend, Congressman Josh Gottheimer, for helping lead this effort here. He's been a champion against the congestion tax during his time in Congress, as I have when I was a member of the state legislature in New York. I introduced legislation during my tenure in the state assembly to ban congestion pricing in New York State and repeal it, because it is nothing more than a tax on suburban commuters, outer borough residents, and a money grab by the most poorly managed authority in the United States of America. The MTA is a disaster. It is corrupt, it is broken, and they need to be reformed, period. Kathy Hochul and the mayor of New York City need to pull back on this ridiculous plan that harms suburban commuters, that negatively impacts our economy, and that hurts working class and middle class families all across the region. We have cops, we have firefighters, we have nurses who commute into New York City, and they have to drive because they don't have good mass transit options. This is going to add over $5,000 a year to the average commuter coming into Midtown Manhattan, on top of the excessive tolls that they already pay to cross the George Washington Bridge or our other tunnels and bridges to get into New York City. It's outrageous, and it has to stop. As the congressman alluded to, we are not an ATM for the MTA. In Rockland County, where I live, where I represent, we pay $40 million more a year in taxes than services we receive. Again, $40 million more in taxes than services we receive. It is totally unacceptable. I have talked many times about the need, frankly, for the Rockland County and maybe Orange County and other counties in New York that are part of the MTA region, that are underrepresented, that have a quarter of a vote on the MTA board, to consider pulling out of the MTA. This has to stop. We are not the piggy bank for the MTA to pay for their bloated and mismanaged operational budget. This is not going to do anything to stop congestion. You want to deal with congestion? Start looking at Uber and Lyft. You want to deal with congestion? Start looking about the fact that you've put, tables and restaurants on streets. All right, that has caused congestion a lot more than the people in Rockland County commuting to work. So if we want to get real about tackling congestion, then let's look at our infrastructure. Let's look at the fact that we need to invest in mass transit options in Rockland, in Bergen, in Westchester, in Orange County, in Putnam County. That's what we need to focus on if we want to make it a possibility for people to commute into the city using mass transit. But to just add a toll is going to do nothing but shift where congestion is. It will shift it to Fort Lee. It'll shift it to the Bronx. It'll shift it to Queens. People will park there and they'll come in other ways. And those are low-income communities that are being hurt by congestion in their communities. You have areas with high asthma rates. You think shifting congestion into those communities is good from a health perspective? This plan is an absolute joke and it needs to be dead on arrival. And that's why we are introducing this bipartisan legislation to say to the MTA, if you are going to move forward with this, to say to Kathy Hochul, if you are going to move forward with this, then you don't need our federal dollars anymore. Exactly. And don't ask for it, because you're not getting one damn cent of it. And I will say this, I will not stop until this plan is dead. Because my constituents, the people in the suburbs of New York City, who already pay among the highest property taxes in America, Rockland and Westchester County, 1 and 2. Bergen's not far behind, but Rockland and Westchester are 1 and 2. This is unacceptable, and we won't stand for it.
Excellent.
So we have fought this at the state level, and I said when I ran for Congress, and since I've been elected, I will do everything in my power to kill this and kill it for good. And I want to thank my colleague and friend Josh Gottheimer, Congressman Gottheimer, for helping lead the charge here. As he mentioned, we're going to work with our colleagues Nicole Malliotakis, Jeff Van Drew, and so many others who agree with us that this is totally unacceptable. And we will push back, and we will get this done, and New York will have a choice. Either take the federal dollars, or you're on your own. That's your choice. So to Kathy Hochul, if you want to move forward and you want to be fair to the residents of New York and New Jersey who commute into the city to work, to provide for their families, then work with us and end congestion pricing today. So thank you to Congressman Gottheimer. Happy to be here and happy to work with him to get this done.
Excellent. Excellent, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.